Hi, welcome to God Stories today. My name's Chris Thompson. You guys coming? Hello everyone, it's Chris Thompson. I'm really thrilled to have Rachel Dunn here this morning. She currently, I believe, is an undergraduate studying at St Mellitus College in the southwest, but she's got some exciting news which is taking her sort of beyond that in a sense, which I'm sure she'll share with you in a moment. Do feel free, as I've mentioned in the other interviews, to check us out on social media, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Equally, these interviews are going to be available on a podcast or via a podcast sometime soon, so have a look out for that. And do subscribe to the YouTube channel and tell others about it. Rachel, welcome to God Stories today. Thank you so much for being here. It really is wonderful.
Thank you for having me.
Snapshot of who you are now. If you could tell people your name. If you want to build up to the news you've had, it's up to you, or you can go straight into it right now. It's entirely up to you.
Okay, I'm Rachel. I am a student, as you said, at St Mellitus, really enjoying study there, and I'm a member of St Andrew's Church in Cullompton. Really enjoy being part of that.
Hello, St Andrew's Church in Cullompton.
Yeah, and so they've been a big part of my journey in the last couple of years.
Wonderful.
I guess I can launch straight in. I got some exciting news just on Thursday. A phone call from the bishop to say that I've been recommended for ordination training. So I'm really excited about that.
That's amazing.
I'm really excited.
When do you start training?
In September.
September. This is 2019, so it's September 2019.
Yeah.
And where are you going to train?
At St Mellitus.
I'm a St Mellitus.
Of course. Where else is there on earth?
That's fabulous. So that's where you are now. But this is your God story. Yeah. Okay, so let's start at the beginning. Where were you born?
I was born in Lancaster. So we lived in a small town called Carnforth. Near the Lake District. So that is where I grew up for the kind of first 9 years of my life.
That sounds idyllic, was it?
It was gorgeous, yeah.
Do you get to go back there a lot?
Now and then.
Right.
Yeah, not drastically often, but when time allows. So.
And what were you like at that sort of age, 5, 6? What were you like as a person?
Gosh, I don't know.
No, you can't remember sort of feeling like were you talkative? Were you cheeky?
Yeah.
Were you quiet? Were you a bookworm even back then? Or what were you like?
Noisy, I think. I've always been noisy. I've always enjoyed singing a lot. Mm-hmm. Disney movies, that kind of thing.
Favourite Disney movie?
The Little Mermaid.
Oh, really?
Although Ursula's really scary. I've just spent a lot of time sitting and watching those things and singing through to every single word, and just as you do when you're kind of
If you haven't seen, I think I'm pronouncing this correctly, Moana.
Yeah.
Yet. Have you seen it?
Yeah, I have. Yeah.
Wonderful. I mean, it is one of the most profound movies about calling that I've ever seen.
Yeah.
It really is.
And such a change as well from the kind of Disney movies that I grew up with, which were very much about a girl attracted to a guy.
Oh, right.
And and Moana, so drastically different in terms of a woman following her dreams and independent.
She's kind of like the out the front sort of adventurous character, isn't she?
Yeah.
Doesn't need, well, she needs people, but not in that sort of, she doesn't need a prince in shining armour to come along and save her. Wonderful, absolutely fantastic. What was your favourite subject at school?
Music.
Of course it was! As you'll hear about soon. She's got a real gift for music. You'll hear about that soon.
I'm sorry if I keep flicking my hair out of the way. I'm conscious of the of the microphone.
Yeah,
so
of course.
It's not because I have some desire to be in a like, L'Oreal advert.
I would do it
or something.
myself, but I don't actually have any
worth it.
hair because I'm bald. But there you go. So you sent me through very kindly a snapshot of your story so far, and it seemed to indicate that at a very early age you became aware of God through quite a dramatic experience.
Yeah.
Would you be willing to talk about that?
Absolutely. My dad was a URC minister, but that kind of happened as he was training for that as we were still in Carnforth. And then we kind of made some visits to Devon to visit some places that he might be posted. And as we were on this trip in Devon, my grandparents were with us. We were in 2 cars, driving along narrow country lanes. So in convoy, and this lorry that apparently shouldn't have been on that road came and sideswiped the car that I was in, lost control and mounted the car my parents were in, pushed it back into a grass bank. And my dad was stuck underneath it for 4 hours.
4 hours?
4 hours, yeah.
Was he conscious? Was he...
Yeah, laughing and joking apparently with the...
Of course he was.
Yeah, of course.
URC minister, of course he was.
That was kind of part of the newspaper clippings that we kind of looked back on and went, this is incredible, really. But they were, really concerned because any wrong move that they made could have been the end of it all. So... and very miraculously, he came out with only a splint on his finger. The lorry was on his legs.
Wow.
Like, how does that happen?
A splint. I got tinglies just thinking about that. So.
And the newspaper clippings as well said that there should have been fatalities.
Really?
And there were none.
So what did this do for the notion of God in your life?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've been taken to church since I was 2 weeks old, apparently. Babe in arms.
You don't remember?
Not specifically. So obviously been kind of taught a lot of things about God, heard a lot of things about God. And so just, he'd always been kind of a natural part. I think when you're that age, you're just unquestioning, aren't you?
Yeah.
Just, my parents have told me that there's God and that he loves me, and so therefore I'm just going to believe that. And as we kind of looked back on this and experienced it to start with, but then looked back on it in the newspaper clippings and just it just felt like it dawned on me every time I read them just how incredibly miraculous the whole thing was. And I guess in tandem with what Dad was doing and his first posting kind of looming and stuff, that gosh, God must really have a plan for his life and what he's doing, and cautiously, maybe even a plan for me. And I was sat in the middle seat of the front car with no seatbelt on, because those were the days when you didn't need it. I'm giving away my age.
So I remember those days as well. It's fine. I remember those days. I'm with you. Solidarity. So I mean, why didn't I go through the windscreen? Golly.
My granddad broke his nose on the steering wheel. He certainly had some force going on. There were other injuries in the car, but I didn't.
So you felt like there was a divine intervention of some sort
certainly.
During that accident, and the spiritual force of that stayed with you, seemingly for some time. Still sticking with that season of your life, those early days, I can remember in my childhood the odd occasion where I kind of just experimented with prayer just to sort of give it a go. I wonder. And I remember there was a time, when I was about 9 years old, and a mate of mine was being bullied. And this huge guy was bullying him, so there was nothing anyone could do about it. So I prayed to God. And it was especially on the way home that this guy would bully my friend. And he would always know the route my friend was taking, even if he deviated. It was just freaky. But I prayed to God, just as a little experiment to see if God would do anything. I said, God, please, protect my mate as he goes home. And rather wonderfully, that very day, my friend got home safely,
Yeah.
and the bullying pretty much stopped after that as well.
Wow.
And I just, crumbs, this thing called prayer seems to work. Now, obviously, it's more complicated now, I get that,
Yeah.
but that was me dabbling. And I'm just wondering, can you remember anything like that when you were growing up? God moments. Oh, and by the way, if that really is free, you can slide it down a little bit. It's still okay.
Yeah, that's, yeah.
If it's going to really sort of jive you.
Yeah, I just...
Just talk amongst yourselves, everyone, at the moment. Just going to have a cup of tea.
I just don't want it to be crackling all the way through and being annoying. I don't know. I don't remember any specific moments. I totally relate to your mate, because that was me a lot of the time. You know,
oh, really?
I used to take long routes home from school to avoid certain packs of people.
Oh.
You know, and yeah. So I mean, this was after we moved to Devon. So you know, there was nothing like that in the school up north. But yeah, high school mostly was a real tough kind of time in terms of that. But I think, you know, though I don't remember any specific examples of you know, praying and something miraculous happening as such, what I do know is that God's presence always was with me.
Right.
And that for me was a real key thing. And I think, you know, any time that I was really struggling with any of these things, I could look back, particularly at that time with the car crash, but then, you know, other memories as well, and see where God had been with me in times where I'd been struggling, and know that He was still with me now. And so, although all of this kind of crazy stuff was going on in my life and I couldn't quite work out what to do with it, I still know that He was the place that I could retreat to.
So God felt the safe place,
Yeah.
the protective place,
Yeah.
all throughout your growing up years, as it were.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about what you just mentioned there, the bullying thing at school?
I'm easy, yeah.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Perhaps you could talk about that, because also, like you just alluded, like, you know, when you were in your teens, from the information you gave me, if something you needed to navigate came your way, you went back to that place. I just feel like there could be some people watching this who perhaps are going through like a bullying sort of experience in their life, be they young people or even adults at work, and they're being bullied.
Yeah.
Perhaps you could talk about that if you're willing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, for me, it wasn't just students either; it was teachers.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That sucks.
Yeah, absolutely. So we had this thing called a contact book, where the teacher used to write comments in that your parents would then be able to see, and then they would sign it at the end of the week. And back then they used to use red pen. They're not allowed to use red pens anymore, no. I reckon it was because of this teacher. She just got so slap happy with it. So yeah, and she would just write in red pen all the way through each and every day of each and every week that, you know, Rachel is doing this, that and the other. Rachel is wearing her hair wrong. Rachel didn't do this. Rachel has done this that isn't right. And, you know, and just constantly that message of, you know, she just seemed to really kind of dislike me from the moment that we met almost, which was a really, really sad thing for me, and something that that really kind of impacted the way that I then interacted in school.
And felt about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, my identity. You know, who I am is not good enough. You know, nothing that I ever do seems to be right. And unfortunately, my response to that was to play up most of the time.
Yeah.
So I'm quite introverted. So, you know, a lot of that kind of sitting in the front room at home, watching repeats of Disney movies and singing along to the words, you know, that was another kind of safe place to retreat to. And with the noise of the family as well, I don't know if I mentioned that, I'm one of 6 children.
That's amazing. That really is.
And, you know, that it was a loud, noisy upbringing with lots and lots of kind of running about and messing around, and, you know, lots of it really, really good fun, but also, you know, and needing just to draw away from time to time. But yeah, I've lost track.
That's okay. What I'm sensing, if I may interject, is that
absolutely.
during those turbulent years of bullying, and also lack of encouragement from your teacher and all that sort of affecting your identity, that God was there in that sort of sometimes distant way, but and sometimes possibly not so distant way, based on that incredible experience of the age of 6. And it was kind of that anchor point. But equally, I get the sense as well that the music side, which if we could delve into that now, because you mentioned you used to sing along to Disney, so it sounds like it was there at the very early. That became a place of solace as well amongst, and a coping mechanism maybe.
Yeah.
Could you talk about that, the music side of
certainly.
things?
Yeah, I mean, there were 2 coping mechanisms really, and I touched on just now that actually the thing that happened most often is that I would rebel, and one of the tactics for that, particularly in school lessons, because my confidence was at such a low, that I would play up in school lessons so that they would send me out. My absolute nightmare moment is for a teacher to pick on me. I have some really stark memories of getting the courage up to actually put my hand up in a lesson and being knocked down, which affects my ability even now sometimes to speak in lectures at St Mellitus. I find it a really scary thing. I just have to go, gonna do it anyway. Gonna do this anyway. So there were 2 responses. I don't want you to kind of think that I'm, that always my response was to go to God. Actually, often my response was to get quite angry actually, and just to be a pain in the backside. If you're going to be this horrible, I'm going to be equally as horrible. And so I was, probably quite painful to teach as well. Sorry.
At least you own it.
Sorry to all of my teachers, apart from the music ones, because I was always nice to them. But singing certainly, for me, singing is prayer.
I was going to say, what does music do to you and singing do to your soul?
I often find it quite embarrassing when I'm in conversations with people.
Do you want to sing? Disney songs just starts coming out.
When we're talking about secular music and they're going, oh, what's your favourite band and stuff? And I just, I don't know a lot of secular music. I know bits and pieces. I'm a singing teacher, so I have to source music for my students to sing. And so there's some stuff that I love. But words for me have always been quite massive and important. And I guess the fact that I've experienced quite a lot of negative words in my life has made me even more passionate to be to communicate positively, and also to kind of in my communication with God as well. So growing up, songs have always been a way, both writing them myself.
Oh right, you write them as well.
Absolutely, and just singing worship songs. It's just been my way of coping with a lot of the things that I struggled with, and taking myself out of, just away from all of that.
So I take it those words, incredibly important as they are, as indicated in the Bible as well, when they're put to music, take on that emotional side even more deeply, don't they?
Yeah, and it's something specifically to do with singing for me.
Right.
And for me, there's something. So, we'll talk in a minute, maybe about my journey with anxiety, and there's something for me that comes when I sing, that I'm singing from almost the same place as I would have that physical sense of anxiety.
Wow.
And so it's as if it's like a healing thing.
Talk about that then. Let's talk about that,
Yeah,
the anxiety side of things. We're jumping ahead a bit here in terms, because I like to go like the chronological side, but obviously this has got some energy to it. So talk about the anxiety thing and how that interrelates to your faith and the singing and other such stuff. You were talking about this in particular. There was this really cool word that Rachel came up with. I picked her up from the station. Freak-sighted. Because the anxiety thing, you say why the word anxiety doesn't quite often hit.
Yeah, so I just think that there's this real link between excitement and anxiety. And I've noticed this because for me, new things cause me heaps of anxiety.
Thanks for being here today.
I just... Whenever I do something that is outside of my comfort zone, I've never done before, or even if I do something that I have done before, even singing often, if I'm leading worship in a place that I've never done that before, I can get quite freaked.
Right.
And as I say, for me, it's a physical reaction. Both in terms of feeling like there's a weight on my diaphragm.
Oh, right, okay.
A physical weight, and also in terms of, my hands shake. It's a nightmare if you're trying to sing and your hands are shaking.
Yeah.
It's absolutely nightmare.
Play the keyboard or something.
Sometimes even my legs will shake. I'm just, physically, it's a bit of a pain. But I just feel like there's this link though as well, because also I see a real value in those new things. And especially in terms of, feel the fear and do it anyway. Or, maybe in more kind of Romans 8 terms, that I've not been given a spirit of fear. And so actually I'm a child of God and I can do stuff. And he's given me gifts. And so therefore I can in that... as an adopted child of God, I can step out into these things, and in doing that, regardless of this physical reaction, I've found a confidence and an intimacy with God that is awesome.
Is that because you have to rely on God in those moments?
Yeah.
It's beyond your human ability.
Absolutely.
As Paul says in the Bible.
Holding on for dear life.
Absolutely.
I
often think that, I'm going to be honest, God rarely, if ever, calls people to do things within their human ability. I think it's pretty much always beyond their human ability so that he can be God. So I think if you are discerning a calling, if you think, you're onto the right thing, you just really are.
Yeah, absolutely.
So talk about the intimacy then that you found with God during those moments.
Yeah, I think, there's just... For me, it's just about that throwing myself on God, and there's just something so powerful about that. Something that says, regardless of my emotions in this moment, I trust you. I know that your plans are for good. I can look back at all of these times in my life and see the way that you've always worked things to good. So I know that in stepping into this thing, particularly if I feel like that's what God's calling me to do, then I'd be completely loopy to not step forward into it. Particularly because every time I have, there's been new freedom and new life.
Talk about that. Talk about that.
Just in terms of this whole thing about that I've travelled with for a long time. I'm not good enough. nothing that I do is ever good enough.
Please tell me this is recording. I got this freak thing. Yes, it's recording. This is gold dust. It's brilliant.
So yeah, nothing that I ever do is good enough, and so therefore I'm not even going to try. And I had that all the way through. I'm amazed. I mean, I did a music degree.
Did you?
But the fact that I actually managed to come out of that with any kind of half decent result, any result, is amazing, because everything that I would do, assignments, whatever, I would leave them right till the very last moment. Burn the midnight oil. I would barely sometimes even turn up to lectures. This is sounding really bad, but I'm coming to something.
St Mellitus is listening right now.
And all of this was because it's like this self-protection thing.
Right, yeah.
If I don't enter into this, if I don't give it my all, when I get that bad result, which I think I'm going to get anyway, even if I put hours and hours into this, I think that it's not ever going to be good enough. So therefore, I won't put hours and hours of this into this. I'll protect myself by just pretending I don't care.
Right. Okay.
I don't care.
Right.
I did that all the way through school, college, university. I don't care. And so actually now there's this unravelling of all of that, which is taking time. But there's an unravelling of all of this. I'm not good enough, which has actually shown me that actually, if I work hard, I will get. I've just got some assignment results which were really good.
Oh, well done.
Come on, I can do this.
What I don't know if this resonates with you, but I'm never happier than when I'm innovating and when there's an entrepreneurial thing going on. I'm a starter-upper, but also a completer-finisher, because I can't stand it when you start something and it's not where it needs to be. Yeah. However, I'm never happier when I'm at the innovation stage, but it's always beyond my human ability that God, as I said before, sort of calls me to. But at those moments when, as you've just been articulating, you bravely step out in fear and trembling, and you feel it there. Yeah. I can't sing, so I don't have that outlet. You see God move. Well, certainly, like I don't see him move in other places, because it's kind of like there's a freedom. I've got to rely on God. I can't rely on me. Yeah. And miracles happen every single time. Every single time. Yeah. So it's almost addictive, to sort of like being an innovator, because you're just addicted to seeing God. Yeah. So,
and particularly when I'm singing, because there's a relation. I mean, I'm a singing teacher as well. Right. So the whole mechanics of singing is something that really interests me. But yeah, so this whole singing from your diaphragm. Well, okay, so at the moment I've got a weight on my diaphragm. So God.
At this very moment?
No.
All right.
Not so much. We're all right. But when I'm in that kind of place where maybe I'm about to lead worship or something like that, and I can feel this weight on my diaphragm in terms of the anxiety, and I'm like, God, I kind of need my diaphragm right now. Yeah. Like, could you just do something? And it feels to me like taking like a massive deep breath of the Holy Spirit.
Right.
And just kind of going, okay, just take over, because I can't actually do this without you. So
I think the ministry that he has called you to be a priest in his church, is going to be astonishing in terms of what he's going to call you to do, because you know what, I think he delights. I think it's almost God's love language when people just say yes to him, regardless, dying to self and finding who you are. In fact, this channel is all about that. This channel is all about ordinary people who do extraordinary things, sometimes quietly, and not because of them having some sort of like, I don't know, quiet hidden superpower that comes out of those moments, but actually because the difference is that they're willing to say yes. That's the difference. I've got a book upstairs of saints throughout the ages, and sometimes I just like reading about their bio, and you read them and often there's nothing special about them. But every single person in that book is someone who's been willing to say yes to God, and that seems, and that's what this channel is about, and it seems that's you as well.
Amen.
So hold on for dear life.
Yeah.
Because you've only just started. And you're a very young person. So who knows what God is going to do. That's really exciting. Yeah. The singing side of things then. I get the sense, because you said in the stuff that you sent over that there's been an awful lot of people who have very kindly been nurturers to you.
Yeah.
But I get the sense you're a nurturer as well. And I get the sense you're an enabler as well. I just get that sense. Is that true? And if so, how does that feel inside your soul when you're doing it? So I'd imagine when you're teaching people to sing and so forth, that's what's coming out. And I would imagine an awful lot of your ministry as a priest will be that as well.
Yeah, it's actually something that that I had a conversation with your lovely wife about yesterday in terms of what it's going to look like in terms of training in September, and a little kind of, do you think that I might still be able to continue just doing a little bit of singing teaching with the teenagers at our local school? Because actually I feel like it's so connected to my calling in terms of helping those young people to raise their voices and to understand that they have a unique identity, that they have something to offer that nobody else can offer. You know, and I just, you know, and right now I have to do that in you know, in kind of secular terms. I feel like it wouldn't be right for me to be preaching at them in their singing lessons when that's not what their parents paid for. But yeah, I just want to kind of, I've always wanted to instill that in them, you know, and I think because there's such a connection for me with identity and singing, you know, it's just, and it's such a vulnerable thing again. It's this thing of like, I'm offering you something. Yeah, this is something precious. This is a gift.
If I may, I would encourage you as you go forth into training for ministry, and then of course go out into ministry. Although if you're training in the fashion you will be, they're kind of almost one and the same. To be aware of layers to ministry. Forgive me, I'm going into area director of ordinary sort of territory here, as I once was. So the discernment of vocations is what I do. But I would imagine that things like, you know, looking after a church and so forth, that will be part of your ministry, but I suspect it will be that and others as well, be bigger than that. So I just want to encourage you in that. Sounds to me, especially with the experience you had at 6, that you've kind of been a Christian all your life in one way. Were there any moments along the way that were mile markers, that were it all deepened, Holy Spirit moments, stuff like that, you know, when you sort of thought, you know, this has gone even deeper now?
Yeah, well, I think, and I guess it's this crazy thing that I haven't quite worked out, but and why it is, but it seems to be always in the times of really of desperation,
right?
Where, and I think you said earlier that you know, is it because that's the moment where you have to cling on to God, and I think that kind of is, and so you know, for me, a really quite intense time of deepening of my faith over the last several years has been because of the death of my dad. And so it was an incredibly crazy 6 months because, you know, we talked about spiritual nurturers. There was a couple, one couple in particular, in my previous church who just really took us under their wing and were always amazing. And I was preparing for my 2-year-old's birthday party, and got family arriving and things. But I was trying to hold it all together because I just found out that that Malcolm, the one half of this couple, had just been taken into hospital, and it wasn't looking good at all. And then my eldest brother and I were kind of also noticing at the same time that Mum and Dad hadn't turned up, and we kind of had expected them to be there a little bit earlier. So he phoned them and tried to work out what was going on, only to find that Dad had been taken into hospital that morning. He'd been leading an elders meeting on the Friday evening.
What's your dad's name?
Chris.
Oh.
And So he had been fine. He'd come home. He was fine. And then my mum had noticed that he wasn't milling around in the morning on the Saturday morning. Went up to see if he was okay, and found that he was desperately ill, and phoned the ambulance. And so you know, we went to see him, but you know, the consultant was fairly certain that things weren't going to be good. Yeah, he had some underlying health conditions, something called Felty's syndrome, which is like a internal version of rheumatoid arthritis, which is quite rare.
Okay.
And he'd got pneumonia.
Right.
And yeah, so the consultant was kind of, you know, he's not going to be around much longer. And by the early hours of the Monday morning, having led that elders meeting on the Friday, been seemingly fine, early hours of Monday morning, he was gone.
Take your time. Take your time.
And swiftly after that, just a few months, my cousin was riding his new motorbike, hit a ridge in the road, came off, hit a lamppost and died pretty well instantly. So we just had this horrendous, Malcolm as well died exactly a week after Dad.
Really?
Yeah, so I've been taken into hospital a couple of weeks before. And so just had this massive, like, what do I do with all of this? You know, how do I even begin to grieve and to work out who God is in the light of these events? And you know, and having quite a low confidence myself, you know, not really having any sense of identity, even though, you know, I've kind of grown up knowing who God is, but there seems to be this disconnect between, you know, knowing who God is and knowing who I am. You know, those two things hadn't really sewn together. You know, even being very heavily involved in church life and you know, leading worship, you know, leading services, leading family services and all those kinds of things, but yet still just not having those two things really kind of marrying up. But it was actually through those really very difficult events that eventually, you know, we're cutting a whole long story short, but eventually stuff started to happen. Initially, when Dad died, I went into it's all okay.
Oh.
It's fine.
Okay.
He's gone to heaven. Best thing for him, the consultant said so. You know, if he'd have survived, he would have had life-changing disabilities to deal with. You know, some of those would have been to do with communication, and you know, my dad, that was his life. You know, he was an amazing communicator, and you know, none of us sitting around in that room trying to work out, you know, what we were going to do. None of us wanted to see him like that, to watch him in that kind of position. So so I just went into, you know, this is okay, and I can support everybody else, and you know, I'm good. Yeah, which worked for about a year or so, actually. Yeah. You know, quite a long time before actually
it hit you.
Boom. Anxiety was so much that I struggled to leave my house to take my children to school.
Really?
Yeah. I literally woke up every morning with it.
Well, like a mortal anxiety,
just like, you know when you wake up from a nightmare, like
yeah.
Just waking up with that and just thinking, how am I going to do this day? I don't even know how to, you know, even if it's a day where all I have to do is take my children to school. It was the thought of seeing people, of being anywhere near anybody, and having to try and have a conversation. You know, the whole thing was just massively consuming.
Can you remember what it did for your relationship with God? Were you asking the why questions as you would have been justified in doing?
Yeah. So hitting that point meant that I had to do something about it, which I guess kind of answers this question at least to some extent, about why it is that we often connect these kind of rock bottom moments with when we find God. It's just that I had to do something about it. I couldn't continue. In the end I ended up on medication, and I didn't really want that, but it did help. It was, it kind of got me to a place where I could at least see the wood from the trees. And for me, singing was an incredible part of it. There was a particular song actually, It Is Well With My Soul.
Oh, yeah.
Grander earth has quaked before, moved by the sound of his voice. Just singing out those kinds of things when actually I did not believe it. And not one iota. I'm singing this kind of it is well with my soul. And actually there's something about praising God, about just being in awe of who he is in the midst of really having quite a lot of questions about all of that, that moved something in me. But then taking another step into, okay, what happens? And this kind of happened by accident in a sense, when, actually I blew up at God. I just completely lost it.
If you hadn't have done, I'd be surprised.
And I just, what are you doing? I don't get this. None of this makes sense. I'm doing this in a much drastically calmer way than I did. Just none of this makes sense. What is, I followed you all my life. Why are you allowing all of this stuff to happen? I don't get it. I don't understand it. But as I am beating against his chest, the most incredible moment happened where I experienced God's love in a way that I never, ever had experienced it before. It was insane. That just kind of made me go, oh, hold on a minute. I kind of accidentally done this, because really logically, I would be thinking, this is God you're talking to, Rach. Simmer down. This is like the God of the universe. Bit of respect. But there was no stopping it. But then with the response, I'm like, oh, hold on a minute. Maybe I've got that wrong. Maybe I've got that very seriously wrong. Maybe God wants all of me. And I mean all of me, as in when I'm angry, he wants to know about it. When when I don't understand, he wants me to come to him, not to just go, oh, well, I'll just tuck that bit back here because God doesn't want to know about that stuff. Actually, he wants all of me.
That's so powerful.
Yeah.
Would you mind talking, if you're willing, about the feeling you just alluded to of experiencing his love like you've never done before? Was that a moment? Was there a place where that happened? What happened?
Yeah. So there were lots of occasions, and some of this was in corporate worship. I found I started going along to the 6:30 service at St Andrews around the time, and I was quite involved in my church at the time in the mornings, and I just needed somewhere that I could just go, that nobody would necessarily know me, and I could just actually be with God, and I spent most of those services just crying.
Yeah.
You know, really, really good, because it's, you know, one of these contemporary services. So, you know, with the lights are low. You know, there's these kind of coloured lights, and you know, it's all set up in that way. So, I actually felt like a really safe place to just kind of sit in the back and just grieve. You know, and just spend those times just saying, God, I don't understand. You know, what are you doing? You know, I've grown up feeling quite crushed, and now I feel like I've basically lost everything. That wasn't true, but that was the feeling. And so yeah, and just so in those moments, but also in the moments on my own at home, because you know, I'm not going to do the beating against God's chest thing in the middle of a corporate worship service. You know, those are the things that I kind of reserve for my living room. You know, when nobody else is in. So yeah, but just a real sense of peace, which was the oddest. I think it's the sense of it is something very contrasting to what you expect to feel in that moment. So I think what I would naturally expect in that moment of rebellion, effectively, is the same response as I would have got from my school teachers in my moments of rebellion.
Yeah, but you got grace.
Yeah, that's exactly what I got. Yeah.
So was there a moment, or was this a season where you felt that over the season? It's a season.
Yeah, and still now.
Really?
It's something that God is still very much working in me on, this whole sense of identity and kind of working through all of these things. I go to a lighthouse ministry in our church as well, which is an in-depth prayer ministry, which just helps me to kind of talk through some of these things, but also, you know, we take those things, those emotions, and we place them before Jesus, and we say, what do you say about these things? You know, if I'm saying I don't believe that I'm good enough, what do you say?
And what does he say?
He says that he knit me together in my mother's womb. And that word knit, for me, there's something painstaking about it. Like, you know, actually every single attribute that you have, everything, is something that I purposely put there. It's something I needed to be there. It's part of who you are. You know, even these things that you often think are negative aspects of your personality, I put them there. I want to use them for good. Yeah.
So when you think about God the Father, having gone through all of that, what do you feel? What do you think of? When you, as God the Father, what does that make you feel like when you think of God as Father now?
It's safety, I guess, in some senses, although...
Now you're called to the priesthood.
yeah. Thanks
also
for that.
Not. Dad's also pushing not. You. Yeah. Come on, daughter.
But there's just such a sense of safety even in that kind of just the confidence, the belief that actually all of this is because he loves me and because he loves the people that he's calling me to. And so, and actually what a privilege to be, for God to think that actually I could ever have anything to offer to anybody, that he could use me for anything. You know, that's not something that I would have in the past believed.
Clearly he's got more confidence than you do yourself. With that in mind, could you talk about what it feels like to have a calling? That inner voice. What does that feel like? What does it sound like?
It sounds like a battle, is what it sounds like. I mean, you know, growing up with you know, a URC minister for a dad.
Mm-hmm.
You see the inside of life, you know, ministering to people and what that means in terms of your home life and kind of the way that work kind of infiltrates into that zone.
So you went into it with a realistic sort of
yeah,
sense.
yeah, and so, you know, I had conversations with God where, because, you know, growing up in that kind of family, you have people who come along and say, oh, you know, do you ever think about doing that? You know, and I have always just been, God, I love you. I am willing to give you absolutely everything, but please don't make me do that. Please don't. Just seriously, please, anything but that.
Mm-hmm.
And so actually the first kind of times where, you know, there was just this kind of steady drop of people who kept coming up to me and saying weird things.
Really? Like what?
Yeah, like, first of all, have you ever thought about Christian leadership?
Ever thought about being the Archbishop of Canterbury?
And I was just like, well, I kind of am, you know, this was at the 6:30, so you didn't know me very well, and I'm like, but I kind of am where I am in my home church. I am already kind of, you know, in Christian leadership. You know, what does that mean if, you know, what you're intimating is that it's something more than that, more than what I'm doing already. So yeah, and then people started using the O word.
The O word.
The O word.
I like that, the O word.
Well, you know, it was what I referred to it as early on in this journey a lot, because I couldn't actually get the word out. I was like, seriously, this is too scary for me. I can't even say the word ordination out loud. You know, I just kind of, yeah. And so, yeah, and I had random events where a friend and I were talking in a coffee shop. I was mentoring her for the Growing Leaders course, and we found that we were both on the same journey. Actually, that she'd been in the Church of England all of her life, and I hadn't. So we were kind of, there were areas in which we differed, but it was amazing that we'd been put together and both found that we were kind of getting this calling to ministry. But I was in that meeting saying to her, I've got this initial registration form, but, you know, I'm umming and ahhing about it. I don't think I'm going to submit it. I just don't think I'm going to do it. And as we get up, there's a lady in the front of the coffee shop as we were walking out who has, you know, comes every now and then to the URC church that I was at then, so, you know, she hasn't seen me in action very much, and had no idea of the conversation that we'd been having, and said to my friend, she's good, she is. She needs one of these. And
God's letting you go.
No way. Seriously. I'm like, God, this is not funny. It's not funny.
Although it is.
Yeah, and we kind of tumbled out giggling, going, and she said to me, I think I need to reassess my calling because I'm not in anything quite as clear as that. Oh my goodness, I think I'm going to have to submit this form. Yeah. I think that was definitely God going, Rach, submit your form. Just do this. That's what I'm asking you to do. You've got to be obedient.
So you did that, and then you entered into the Church of England formal process.
Yeah.
And then
At which point they told me, surprise, surprise, that I did actually need to go to a Church of England church.
Ah.
So
there you go.
That's how we ended up at St Andrews. So funny old order.
Last question before we get into the quick fire round, which my mate John Thurston said we should call Spotlight, which I think is a good title for it. Theological question, if I may. What is it to live the resurrection life?
Okay.
Small question.
Yeah.
You're a vicar now,
yeah,
almost.
So it's an amazing thing. So to know that we have the the power, the same power living in us as the resurrected Jesus. We have that. I'm forgetting the actual words of the actual verse, but you know what I mean. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
The same power lives in us.
It's amazing.
Thank you.
Spotlight, you ready?
Oh, not really.
Okay.
Okay.
The thing you can't live without.
Is this supposed to be deep or not really?
Yeah, it is. I think this is really deep. I really do, because this is one of those
Do you know the
personalities.
first thing that came to my mind?
What was that?
Cheese.
Hey, that says a lot. It says a lot.
Cheese in all its beautiful varieties.
Secret pleasure? Cheese. Dark chocolate or milk chocolate?
Dark.
Really?
Every time.
Can you reverse park?
Yes.
Well done. I feel like I want to ask this one, but
Oh dear.
you're in heaven. Who's the first family member you'd like to meet?
Gosh. Yeah, it has to be my dad.
Okay.
Yeah, of course.
What people have been very kind in doing to sign us off, as it were, is to pray. To pray for the viewers and for anyone, I guess, who's out there watching this, is in a good place or a bad place, but nonetheless, this prayer is to them. And it can be for obviously years and years to come, as people will watch this interview over that time. So if you'd be willing to pray us out, Vicar, that would be great.
Yeah. Father God, thank you for being here with us. Thank you that you're incredibly loving. Thank you for your grace, and thank you that grace is for every single person watching, every person who relates to any part of this story. And I pray that you, by your Spirit, would speak life and love and grace to each person. That you would have your way in their lives. And I pray that anything that you have been nudging them toward doing, any of those nudges that they've been trying to push into the background, that you would give them the courage to be able to take a step forward, take a step toward you, knowing that it is toward you, it is with you, that everything that you ask us to do is because you are good and you are faithful. Thank you for all that you will do in the lives of those who will step forward in obedience.